20 years ago, Dino Crisis hit the PlayStation. More than a few people called it Resident Evil with dinosaurs instead of zombies, but it had a number of marked improvements on Resident Evil. It was actually a pretty large success. People really liked Dino Crisis, and it had a number of sequels. However, it's been 16 years since the last game. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx we ask the question, what killed the Dino Crisis series? In 1999, the original Dino Crisis came out on the original PlayStation. Now, keeping in mind this was quite a late release in that console's life cycle, it's definitely worth talking about just for a moment exactly how advanced it was compared to Capcom's previous titles, which resembled it, namely the Resident Evil games. Where Resident Evil took place entirely on pre-rendered backdrops, Dino Crisis did fully real-time polygon backgrounds, and they looked pretty damn good. The original PlayStation version sold 2.4 million copies, and it was also ported to Sega Dreamcast and Microsoft Windows, where it did receive a pretty decent graphical boost, if only mainly from the resolution change and the filtered textures. Now, a lot of people at the time made, I think, a bit harsh of a comparison to Resident Evil in that it definitely is very much like a Resident Evil game in most ways, besides the fact that it wasn't zombies, it was dinosaurs. However, if we talk about some of the elements of the game, like I said, the backgrounds are all real time, and if we go even further, the inventory is much more, I would say, mainstream as opposed to survival oriented. It had a weirdly appealing dynamic to it that just brought people in. A lot of people. It was intense too. The dinosaurs were done in a manner that actually made the game kinda scary. For the time, the AI was really good. The sounds were amazing. Everything just kinda meshed a little bit better than in Resident Evil, even if in some ways it was extremely derivative of it. Now, with success comes a sequel, and with the sequel comes, I think, an explanation of the problems. Not a full one, but one that I think you'll know where it's going as soon as we consider the juxtaposition of Dino Crisis 1 and 2. Dino Crisis 2 is not much like Resident Evil, and therefore it's not much like Dino Crisis. It's not a survival horror game, it is an action-adventure game, and although it does continue the story technically and continues to exist in the same game world and so on, it does not feel anything like the original game. Now, that's not to say it's a bad game. It's actually a very good game. It does a good job of creating an action shooter on pre-rendered backgrounds, which kind of feels like a step back, but at the same time it implements it well, giving you nice big open areas in which you have to use the environment in a lot of cases to your advantage. It's a fun game and it's interesting. It also has a little bit better dinosaurs with a little bit more variety, and speaking specifically about this game, I don't have a lot negative to say. But I think here's where we can easily understand where things started to go wrong. Now, when you make a series of games, people kind of expect you to continue making the same kind of game and continue making improvements. Now, if a developer changes a formula and then the series stays on that road, it likely will be known for that formula. You'll be able to build some kind of rapport with your customers where there's an expectation established and people get the vision why you're doing it. And I don't want to say that every single series just has to remain stagnant and be the same, but I am saying that there is some deal of confusion when you take a hard right turn. You can compensate for it by not taking another hard turn, but that's not what Capcom did with Dino Crisis. The next Dino Crisis game was called Dino Stalker. It was a light gun game that did take place in the same universe and technically continued the story, and was basically part of the Gun Survivor series, which is a spin-off of the Resident Evil series, which in its own way makes perfect sense given what Dino Crisis actually is. And then in 2003, they threw basically everything out, all the characters, the setting and story, and made a Dino Crisis 2 type game set in the year 2548, where a colony ship has reappeared after disappearing 300 years ago, and oh, looks like dinosaurs were the problem. And I want you to take just a quick look at the box art. This is called Dino Crisis, right? This is a game, in fact, the third in a series of games with an established history and narrative, essentially that should be about a crisis involving dinosaurs. All of the other packaging has dinosaurs on it, or at least some indication that there are dinosaurs in the game, which even the North American version of the original, which doesn't have a dinosaur on it, has a scratch that very clearly came from a dinosaur on a steel door, including Dino Stalker, the out-of-left-field light gun game. And yet this next entry in the mainline series is just like, alright. Well, at least in North American markets. Again, other markets had covers that were better. Also, Dino Crisis 3 sucks. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it's not nearly as enjoyable as literally any other title in the entire series, and the light gun game is pretty flawed for a light gun game, so that's saying something. Dino Crisis 3 just doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Like, nothing about it is really scary at any point, and you also don't get any real sense of action or adventure. It's kind of slow and dull and doesn't really know what it wants to be. And it's right here that I think you should understand what basically went wrong with the series. Now, even though Dino Crisis 2 was good and people were generally fine with it, it sold quite a bit less than the first. It was still a commercial success, however, people were at least kinda confused, but liked the first enough to give the next a spin, and also it was reviewed pretty well, but that confusion exists. Even in some of the good reviews, people were confused by what exactly the game was supposed to be. I mentioned the light gun game is kinda not great. I don't know that it's really worth detailing massively on account it's not a mainline entry to the series and deviates so far. It's not bad, but it's not good either. But like I said, Dino Crisis 3 is outright bad and changes up basically everything everyone knew and cared about the first two titles that managed to transcend genre. They were just like, nah, none of that's gonna be here. Which, cool, right? So what we have is a series that never really defined what it is, other than it's got dinosaurs in it, and it didn't really do enough to make sure people understood that beyond the title of Dino Crisis. Like, you can't tell me you would go through the store and see that Dino Crisis 3 cover and be like, wow, that Dino Crisis game looks awesome. No, there's two people on it, and a spaceship that looks bad, like not even a good spaceship. And it didn't sell well or get reviewed well, nor did it have the good faith of a previous title that was particularly good in the recent past. Although, it had only been 4 years since the original. By the time they released the third, only 4 years had passed and a new game had come each one of those years. Not only that, but the games came out on PlayStation. Therefore, the fan base was using PlayStations and had migrated to PlayStation 2 by the time Dino Crisis 3 came out, which makes a really strong case for making Dino Crisis 3 an Xbox exclusive. What? So that really didn't work out well for them. That game did not sell very well. And that was it. That was the last time they did one of those games. A year ago, Capcom said, if enough people wish for there to be a remake, Dino Crisis could return. And then there were a bunch of rumors around E3 2019 that they would announce a new Dino Crisis game, or at least a new Resident Evil engine game. That didn't materialize, which is unfortunate, but basically what I expected. The thing about, quote-unquote, if enough people want it, doesn't take into account that both Dino Crisis 1 and 2 are very different games, and the latter two games of the series are nowhere near of the quality of the first two, and also bear very little resemblance to either of those games. It's not like a series where there has been a number of mainline releases that everyone pretty much celebrated over the course of 20 years. It's a series that over 4 years went from an improvement on Resident Evil that uses a different type of horror to dinosaur shooter in space, not good. I think a lot of people don't even really know what they would get if they demanded a sequel and Capcom announced it. While I personally very much would like to see a continuation of the original survival horror Dino Crisis, I'd wager there's actually a lot of people who played the second one and never played the first one, even though it sold a little bit less. It could very well be that those people would be disappointed by that project, and in a lot of ways that lines up exactly what's so precarious in releasing a new Dino Crisis game. It would have to be a reboot, and regardless of its quality, it would have to pick a type of game. And it may not pick the one that works in 2019. We don't know really what that is. I would hope for something a lot more along the lines of a Resident Evil 2 style remake, with possibly new content just starting the series over, more or less kind of in the vein of the original Dino Crisis, or just entirely remaking the original Dino Crisis in that exact way. Some fans are doing what seems to be exactly that, although it's really in the stage of just art at this point. You can check out their work on YouTube. Their name is Team Arclays. But beyond that, we don't really know. Certainly, it would be cool, and I would love to see Dino Crisis remake in the vein of the Resident Evil 2 one, and I really hope somebody else at Capcom is thinking the same way I am. It's hard to tell because that series was unpredictable in the 4 years it existed actively, and it's just been dead since then. What do you think? What would you want in a Dino Crisis reboot? Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, please click like, and if you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is of course a subscription. So click subscribe and don't forget to click the notification bell. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.